Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be exploring something that I think is really fascinating, and that is the evolution of what makes us uniquely human,
Oh, well, absolutely.
focusing specifically on communication and cognition.
Yeah.
So we'll be jumping into excerpts from Becoming Human by Teresa Bejarano,
Great book.
which I think you've also read.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, a book that delves deep into the development of language and thought, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah.
So, right off the bat, one of the things that stood out to me from the beginning of this book
Mm-hmm.
was this really interesting fact. Humans, it turns out, are the only primates
Right.
with highly visible white sclera.
That's crazy.
The whites of our eyes, it seems so basic.
Right.
But, it's one of those things you just never really think about.
You don't until somebody points it out and you realize, oh, that's weird.
Right. Like, why is that?
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear, what are the evolutionary implications of that?
Well, she talks about how it's actually a very crucial evolutionary advantage for us to have that visible white sclera because it allows for clear communication of gaze direction,
Oh, interesting.
which
Sure.
is absolutely essential when we're talking about things like shared attention and social learning.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, like if
Yeah.
you're trying to teach somebody something new, if you can't actually see where their eyes are pointed,
Uh-huh.
you have no idea if they're even paying attention to what you're trying to show them.
It's true, yeah. Like, if you think about, even in just simple conversations, how much we rely on those visual cues,
Absolutely.
it really is kind of wild.
Yeah.
So, something else that really jumped out to me from this book, and I remember this being such a big thing. I
know.
think it was maybe in the 90s when this was first coming out, mirror-neurons.
Yes.
And I remember all this excitement about,
Yeah.
monkeys simulating actions,
Right.
and then they found them in humans as well. Bejarano suggests that maybe it's not simulation, maybe it's more about expectation.
Exactly. That's a really crucial distinction to make
Okay.
when we're trying to assess primate cognition. Because simulation, that word, implies a deeper understanding of another's mental state,
Okay.
almost like you're stepping into their shoes,
Oh, okay. Huh.
versus expectation,
Uh-huh.
which is more about predicting actions based on your past experience.
So it's less about feeling what the other is feeling and more about just sort of
Oh, yeah.
anticipating actions based on what you already know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was a really good example in the book about a study that was done with monkeys,
Oh, okay.
where they trained them to use both regular pliers
Okay.
and reverse pliers.
Okay.
And it turns out that their mirror neurons, they didn't seem to distinguish
Right.
between the different hand movements that were required for each type of pliers.
Huh.
They were responding to the expected outcome, grabbing an object,
Oh, interesting.
rather than the specific motor actions involved.
Okay. So does this mean we've sort of overestimated animal intelligence?
Well, I think it's a complex question.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not that we've overestimated it. Maybe we just need to understand better what theory of mind
Yeah.
means across species.
Okay.
It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Yeah, it's probably a spectrum.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
So that raises some pretty fascinating questions
Yeah.
about the evolution of consciousness and social intelligence.
Absolutely. So moving on from there, another thing that Bejarano highlights as a real distinction between us and other primates is something that's so simple, we do it from infancy, pointing.
Right.
But she points out, no pun intended,
Right.
that there's actually a lot of complexity beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's far more than just directing attention to an object.
Right.
When we point at something, it requires an understanding that the other individual have intentions and that they are trying to share information with us.
It's like a shared agreement, almost,
Yeah.
that we're both looking at this and I want to communicate something about it.
Right. And this is where we see the big difference
Got it.
between humans and, let's say, chimpanzees. Chimpanzees, they can follow gaze,
Okay.
but they really struggle with pointing. So they might see you looking at something,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't grasp the significance of you pointing at it.
Right.
And that suggests there's a crucial difference
Oh, wow.
in the way we perceive and understand intention.
Yeah. And Bejarano argues that this really supports the idea that humans have what she calls a second mental center,
Yes.
which is this deeper understanding of other minds. So it's not just that we're reacting to actions, it's that we can actually sort of decipher the intentions behind those actions.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like a mind-reading ability to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And that allows us to navigate, I guess, social interaction and cooperation and learning in a way that other primates just
Right.
they just can't seem to do.
Even our closest relatives just don't quite get there.
Wow. So from there, She goes on to explore another really fascinating concept that I hadn't really thought about before, which is what she calls four-handed cooperative actions.
Yeah, those are really fun.
So these are tasks that require two people to work together.
Right, working together, yeah.
So she gives an example of like extracting water from a container where one person has to press on the walls while the other collects the water.
Right.
Which seems simple, but, thinking about it, it requires shared understanding, coordinated action,
Absolutely.
a level of trust even that the other person will fulfill their part.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And it's like a building block
Okay.
for more complex social interaction.
Right.
So cooperation is kind of built on top of that.
Gotcha. And then she goes on to connect this to human development, which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah.
She suggests that all of those games that we play with kids when they're little, like pat-a-cake,
Right.
are actually honing
Exactly. They're practicing
these
it.
really crucial skills for shared planning and coordination.
Which is incredible when you think about it. Like all the stuff we do as humans,
Yeah.
building cities, exploring the cosmos,
Right.
creating art, it's all based on this foundation of being able to plan together and coordinate our actions.
It really puts it in perspective. Like even our most advanced achievements are sort of built on these really basic fundamental blocks of social interaction.
Yeah, it all comes down to how we interact with each other.
Right, which is fascinating. So speaking of, how we interact with each other, I really want to dive into the world of language and meaning with you because Bejarano does a really fascinating exploration of that in this book.
She does, yeah.
So we all start with these adorable babbles as babies, but she points out that those seemingly random vocalizations are not actually meaningless.
No, they're not just noise.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear you kind of unpack that a little bit.
Well, think about it. Even babies, they're actively trying to imitate the sounds of adult speech.
Oh, wow.
So they're already on that path towards language acquisition,
Gotcha.
even at that very early stage.
It's like they're realizing that sounds actually carry meaning and that communication is possible.
Exactly.
Yeah. But then how do they go from those like simple babbles to understanding that certain sounds actually represent specific things?
Right. So Bejarano, she talks about the development of what she calls the phonemic social model.
Okay.
Which is essentially children learning to chunk those sounds they're making into units that have shared meaning.
So they're mimicking sounds, but then at some point they're like, okay, this combination of sounds consistently refers to this thing, like mama means mother.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And what's really interesting is that she highlights the role of inner speech in this transition.
Oh, okay.
So inner speech, that relies on this phonemic model, not on the detailed motor sequences for producing each sound.
Gotcha.
So it's like a shift towards abstract thought and understanding.
So as they develop that inner dialogue, they're not just mimicking, they're actually manipulating those sounds in their mind to represent concepts and ideas.
Right. They're starting to think in language.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It makes you really rethink the whole relationship between thought and language.
Yeah. Are we limited in our thinking by the structure of language?
Right.
Or does language just reflect the complexity of our thoughts?
It's like a chicken and egg thing.
Exactly.
So Bejarano also introduces this concept of predication, which is our ability to express information about a subject.
So it seems straightforward.
Yeah, like the bottle is broken. But the way she connects that to theory of mind is really fascinating.
Yeah, because when you say something like the bottle is broken, you're not just stating a fact, you're making an assumption about what the other person knows.
Gotcha.
Or doesn't know.
So even a simple sentence like that has this hidden layer
Absolutely.
of social understanding.
Yeah. We're constantly assessing what other people know and believe.
Right.
And we use language to sort of negotiate those shared realities.
That's so wild.
It is wild. Yeah. It makes you appreciate all the complexity that's woven into our everyday communication.
Absolutely.
Which we don't even think about.
We take it for granted.
Totally.
It's just so automatic at this point.
Yeah.
But it's so much more than we realize.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our deep dive into becoming human.
Yeah.
Last time we left off talking about predication and how even just like really simple statements that we make reveal this deeper understanding of others' minds.
Exactly.
Which is just wild.
Yeah, it is.
But Bejarano, she gives this really wonderful example to illustrate it.
Right.
Imagine a child who's playing with blocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mother asks for more blocks, but the child, knowing there are no more, says, no more,
Right.
which seems like a very simple response.
Yeah.
But as she points out, there's a lot more going on.
Oh, way more
Yeah.
than meets the eye there.
So unpack that for us. What's actually happening in that interaction?
Well, that seemingly simple phrase that the child is uttering is actually a statement about the mother's false belief.
Oh.
They're communicating, you think there are more blocks, but you're wrong.
Oh, wow.
So even young children,
Yeah.
they're already navigating
Right.
these really complex social dynamics,
Yeah.
and they're using language to express their understanding
Right.
of other people's beliefs, which is just incredible.
It's like they're constantly assessing what others know
Yep.
and believe, and then adjusting their communication accordingly,
Right. It's a constant back and forth.
which we don't even think about.
No, it's all happening under the surface.
And Bejarano's book, it really shines a light on those hidden complexities.
It does.
It challenges us to rethink those everyday interactions and those things that we just take for granted
Yeah,
and realize, wow, there's a lot going on there.
absolutely.
Even the way we perceive speech,
Right.
she points out, it's not just about hearing the sounds.
Mm-hmm.
It's about understanding them in a way that connects to our own physical actions.
Exactly.
She calls this motor reception, right?
Yes.
And it ties back to what we were talking about before
Right.
with mirror neurons,
Mhm.
which is this idea that we're not just passively listening to sounds,
No.
but that we're actively engaging our motor systems,
Right.
simulating those speech movements in our minds.
Exactly. Like our brain is having a conversation with our body. Yeah. About what we're hearing.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, we're translating that sound into meaning by drawing on our own experiences of producing those sounds.
Which makes sense because our brains and our bodies are so connected.
Absolutely. They work together in everything we do.
So how does this motor reception play into language development, especially in children?
Well, when you think about babies babbling and experimenting with sounds,
Right.
it's not just mimicry.
Okay.
They're actually exploring those physical sensations of speech
Wow.
and laying the foundation for understanding how those sounds relate to meaning.
It's like their mouths are these little laboratories
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
where they're just testing out all
Yeah.
these different ways to make sounds and then connect them
Yeah.
to the world around them. And so much learning is happening even before they can, speak in full sentences.
It's all happening beneath the surface.
And as they get older, does that connection between physical action and language understanding, does that deepen?
Oh, absolutely. You start to pick up on intonation,
Right.
the rhythm of speech,
Yeah.
all those subtle ways we use our voices to convey meaning that goes beyond just the literal words.
It's like the unspoken language of human interaction.
Exactly.
And she also delves into some really fascinating topics, like
Yeah.
the role of memory
Right.
and how it plays into language acquisition, and also the development of complex syntax.
Right.
Like, our brains really have evolved to be able to handle
They have.
these really intricate structures and rules that govern human language.
It's amazing how much we just do without thinking.
Right.
Like we just effortlessly translate sound into meaning.
Yeah.
But there's this incredibly complex system at work, honed over millennia of evolution,
Right.
that allows us to do that.
And that's what really sets us apart, right?
It is.
She points out that while, some birds, for instance, they might have mirror neuron systems that allow them to, learn and produce these complex songs, they're not doing it with the same flexibility and creativity as human language.
Yeah.
Theirs is serving very specific purposes,
Right.
like attracting mates or defending territory.
Right.
But it's not with that same level of, conscious control
Right.
and nuanced meaning that we can pack into our words.
Yeah, and we use language to do so much more than just communicate basic needs.
Uh-huh.
We shape our thoughts with it, we reason with it, we imagine, we create whole new worlds in our minds.
So it's that ability to think abstractly,
Right.
to manipulate symbols and share those thoughts and ideas with others
Exactly.
that really sets us apart.
And that's what's allowed us to collaborate and innovate in ways that other species haven't been able to.
Yeah. She makes the argument that our ability to communicate in such a complex way has played this crucial role in our success as a species,
Absolutely.
which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how much of this is nature versus nurture?
Well, it's a bit of both, right? Like we're born with the capacity for language.
Oh.
But it's the environment that we're raised in, the interactions we have, the knowledge we're exposed to that really shapes how that capacity develops.
So it's like we're born with a blueprint, but it's our experiences that determine the final structure.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
And that structure, it's not fixed, it's constantly changing, right?
It is.
With each new piece of information we get, each new interaction.
Exactly. We're always adding to the complexity of that structure.
Which is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
And it emphasizes the power of cultural learning.
It does.
And its impact on our cognitive abilities.
It really challenges this idea that our intelligence is just determined by our genes.
Right?
Like it's just pre-programmed.
Yeah.
It's so much more dynamic than that.
Yeah. And that makes me think about how empowering that is.
It is.
Like, we're not just passive recipients of information.
Right.
We're actually actively shaping our own minds.
We are.
Through the choices we make, the people we surround ourselves with.
Exactly. We have a lot more agency than we might realize.
And that kind of leads us to thinking about, like,
Yeah.
what are the things that really encourage curiosity and critical thinking and dialogue? Because those are the things that are going to help our minds grow.
Exactly. The more we engage with those things, the more our understanding of the world expands.
Yeah.
The more we challenge those assumptions.
Yeah. It's like a muscle.
Exactly.
You got to use it to make it stronger.
Right. And the cool thing is that growth isn't limited to just individuals.
Oh, yeah.
It happens on a societal level, too.
Right, because we're sharing knowledge.
Yeah.
And we're collaborating with each other and building on each other's ideas.
Exactly. And that collective growth pushes the boundaries of what's possible.
And it's this never-ending process
I see
of
it.
discovery and creation.
It never stops.
Welcome back to our deep dive into becoming human.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has. We've been exploring all these intricate connections between communication and cognition. And it's amazing how Bejarano kind of weaves all these threads together, from the whites of our eyes to the complexities of syntax.
That's all connected.
It really is, to paint this really rich picture of what makes us uniquely human.
It's a beautiful tapestry, isn't it?
It is. It really highlights how interconnected our biology, our minds, and our culture are.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
she leaves us with this really powerful message about the ongoing evolution of our species.
Yeah, one of the key takeaways for me was this idea that we're not static.
Right.
We're not fixed.
Yeah.
Our minds are constantly adapting, shaped by the knowledge we acquire and the experiences we share with others.
It really highlights the power of cultural learning, doesn't it?
It does, and its impact on our cognitive abilities.
And it challenges this idea that our intelligence is solely determined by our genes. Like we inherit the capacity for language and thought, but it's the environment that we're immersed in,
Right.
the interactions we have,
Right.
the information we're exposed to that molds and refines those abilities.
It's like we're born with this blueprint, but it's our experiences that really determine the final structure.
I like that analogy.
And that structure is not fixed, is it? It's constantly being remodeled.
Right.
With each new piece of information we get,
Right.
with each new interaction, we're adding to the complexity of that structure.
We're always learning and growing.
Yeah, which is, I think, a really empowering message.
It is. It means we have a lot more agency than we might realize.
Because we're not just passive recipients of information.
Right.
We're actively shaping our own minds.
Through the choices we make, the experiences we seek out,
Yeah.
the people we surround ourselves with.
Exactly. So that makes me think, what are the things that we can do to foster curiosity and critical thinking and open dialogue?
Right, because those are the things that are going to help our minds continue to grow.
Because those are the things that help us kind of break out of those limited ways of thinking and really expand our understanding of the world.
The more we challenge our assumptions, the more we learn.
Yeah. It really is like a muscle. The more you use it,
Right.
the stronger it becomes.
And the cool thing is that growth isn't limited to individuals.
Right. It happens on a societal level, too.
As we share knowledge and collaborate with each other,
Yeah.
as we build upon the ideas of previous generations, as we challenge existing paradigms,
Yeah.
push the boundaries of what's possible, we're collectively contributing to this ongoing evolution of human thought.
It's this never-ending process of discovery and creation.
Exactly. And it's a pretty awe-inspiring thing to be a part of, don't you think?
It really is. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into becoming human, it leaves us with this really intriguing question. If human minds are constantly evolving,
Right.
shaped by both our biology and our culture, what does the future hold for our species?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. How will our communication and cognition continue to adapt? As we face new challenges and new opportunities, I mean, it sparks so much excitement,
It does.
but also a healthy dose of awe, I think, to think about where we might be headed.
I completely agree.
Well, this deep dive has given us a really fascinating glimpse into the journey that brought us to this point,
Right. And the limitless possibilities that lie ahead.
which is really exciting to think about.
It is. And the best part is we're all active participants in this unfolding story.
We are. So thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. And we'll see you next time as we continue to delve into all the wonders
Absolutely.
of the world and the human experience.